Hello, everyone. Welcome to another interview here. We have a wonderful filmmaker whose film showing at the Encounters Film Festival 2025. I'm excited to have here Rehad Desai. We're going to listen to his bio, and when we come back, we're going straight into the interview as we talk about his film, Capturing Water. So stay tuned. Rehad Desai is a South African Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker and political activist known for hard-hitting, socially conscious films like Miners Shut Down, Everything Must Fall, and How to Steal a Country. A former exile turned storyteller, his work tackles justice, inequality, and resistance, blending personal insight with global urgency. His latest film, Capturing Water, continues his tradition of spotlighting marginalized voices and sparking critical conversations. All right, you heard all about this filmmaker I have here today, Rehad Desai. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a real pleasure.
Exciting to have you here. And the film was quite an interesting one. It's a documentary showing at Encounters, like I mentioned earlier, and I've had the opportunity to watch and review the film. I would like to go straight into it and ask, what was the inspiration behind Capturing Water?
Cape Town's my hometown, and I'm aware I've been following the climate and ecological crisis that the planet's facing, in particular Africa, and in particular South Africa. And Cape Town is one of those places which is set to become more and more water stressed, less rainfall, less predictable rainfall, and how we begin to adapt to that is critical if our cities are to survive. We are now facing a generalized problem across South Africa. Province interrupted supplies. They're cutting off communal taps in informal settlements, what often people call the slums, people who pay and water bills because there's simply not enough water at this present moment to be able to give every priorities. What do we need to prioritize when we have to share what we have and hopefully catchphrases, but the film's about drilling down on what that means.
Watching the film, I realized you use a lot of the idyllic scenes of Cape Town. We usually see the lovely landscapes, we appreciate all the beautiful greenery, the scenery, and then we are hit with the harsh reality. Was this an intentional choice?
Yes, very intentional. And we spent a lot of time trying to capture the beauty of the place. It's one of those cities that's been declared a wetland city, and a number of those sites are what they call Ramsar sites, places of importance for the world's natural environment, for habitat of wildlife and bird life and so on, and plant life. South Africa is a particularly hotspot in Cape Town for the diversity of flora and fauna. And this is, again, a critical point. It's just not there because it hasn't been given this status just because it's beautiful. It's important for the sustaining of an environment we can all live in. So I think there's an unconscious, it's both conscious, but also deeply unconscious, that we are attracted to beauty, to the world's creation, to our environment, and we are also, again, unconsciously appalled when we see its destruction. I wanted to play on that visual level as a very important aspect for me for this film.
And how long did it take to conceptualize this idea and actually execute it? Because we see some scenes from all the way back in 2017 and, all the way down to 2023, I think. How long did it take to actually produce this documentary?
Well, we were planning and intending to make a documentary if the taps were turned off in Cape Town, because that would have meant 235 distribution points, and those distribution points people would have to physically come to collect would mean huge queues given the size of the population. And we wanted to see how that would plan. We were looking at the militarization of society. But the actual idea, I was approached by some local academic and activist types in 2020. In 2021, I decided I would make the film, that there was a strong enough cast, so to speak, a set of protagonists that could carry the issues that I thought were critical to deepen our understanding of the opportunities, but also the limitations of the local ecology, in this sense, water supply. So, yeah, by the end of 2021, early 2022, we decided we were on a train and we were going to make this film and do what it takes to realize that, the concept. And that meant following our protagonists for a couple of years up until the end of beginning of 2023. So we were filming for over 2 years. Yeah, I'm very happy with the outcome and the reception. That's critical for me.
We're going to get into the protagonists and also the reception from the audience, but I'd also still like to stay on the process of making the documentary. For instance, the underwater cinematography was quite interesting to watch, especially the shots of the sewage outfalls. And it was very uncomfortable. When I was watching it, I really felt uncomfortable. And what was the process of capturing those images? How did you want the audience to respond? Because I was personally very uncomfortable watching it.
Yeah, so I mean, what happens under the water, under the surface of the water, is just as important to what happens on the land, and trying to overcome this division we have that somehow that, well, we can't see what happens under, so we don't need to think about it, is a fallacy, really. And that's meant that our water, oceans, our rivers, our wetlands have become dumping grounds, and we've lost our understanding of how important these bodies of land which contain water and the oceans are for our general health, the health of our planet. So I wanted to play with that. I wanted to play with the fact that we have a relationship to water, a recreational, and in the instance of Cape Town in South Africa, given the racial divide that's often, the white people who use the water for recreational purposes. But I do think we've all drawn to water, and I just felt, yeah, that would be a nice device in order to try and to get people to a more contemplative space to contemplate, our natural world.
It's interesting you just spoke about the racial divide, because that was going to be my next question. Was there any specific moment during production when you realized that the film would be more than just like you recording the drought that was happening in Cape Town, but be more like a deeper commentary on post-apartheid inequality?
Yes, firstly, what sits at the center of my passion and commitment to the process is, again, this understanding that it's going to become more and more water stressed year after year. And there's an estimation by 2030, 250 million people on our continent will be living in water-stressed conditions. Much of that is in the urban areas and our urban centres. So I'm convinced we need to deepen our understanding of our ecology and how humans impact on that. That many of the decisions that are made around the distribution and supply of water are political decisions, and that we need to begin to really drill down in a much deeper way. Now, our conquest of our land by European imperial powers and settlers meant that we lost water, our access to water with it. And in South Africa, the attempt to shift that system where it meets all of our needs, household needs in particular, has been a long and hard battle which we haven't won. We're still struggling to design a water system of supply and distribution where equality is at the center of that. Access, it becomes the key issue. Who has access to water and to what amounts and for what purposes? So I knew from the beginning that this was a sort of blended, what we would call a blended essay film, where there are protagonists and there's narratives that go along, as we follow the protagonists. But also there's a need to bring in some essay elements into the film. So that's what we call a blended essay documentary.
How do you approach that style? Because, there's a tendency to be a bit biased when you are filming a documentary. For instance, there was a statement made by Ebrahiem Fourie during or in the documentary, and I quote, urbanization that has happened since the collapse of apartheid is another form of apartheid. And it's a very powerful statement he made. But how do you, as a filmmaker, then are balancing such an overt political statement like this with the observationary documentary style and not coming across as being so, having a particular direct motive with your work?
Yeah, I think a modern documentary really, in order to work internationally and for film festivals as well as people at home on TV screens who are increasingly sophisticated, needs to sort of blend you need a blended approach to the genres. So it's partly observational, it's partly essayistic, it's partly character driven. But the point of view, I think, for documentary filmmakers is critical, because this is what, for us as filmmakers, makes a strong film, that you really get an undiluted point of view. But with inside the point of view, our role is to interrogate the point of view. Also, objectivity. We're looking for objectivity within the point of view. So the point of view itself is deeply subjective of the realities of our protagonists. The construction of their comments are made. I think it's important to utilize them to understand the worldview of the person needs unpacking further. But for the moment, I think that will do. I mean, I'll use an example, miners who were killed by the police. And that meant that we were duty bound to give order for it to stand up as a narrative. We had to make sure that that there were no lies in the piece. That doesn't mean you take out their opinions.
In terms of the documentary making still, and we'll get to the audience pretty soon, but like the film critiques government inaction and the poor infrastructure despite the progressive environmental laws. We saw a lot of it in the film. Were you getting any pushback while you were making the film? I'm sure a lot of people were not excited about the fact that you were putting all of this together, you were documenting it for all to see. Because for me in Ghana, this issue of water scarcity in Cape Town was not something that I was very familiar with until watching the film. So the film has really broken that barrier of like from South Africa all the way to West Africa, spreading the news and getting people to know the situation on ground. So were there any pushbacks you were experiencing from public officials and other individuals?
Yeah, it wasn't easy getting access to the public officials, but it was very important because it provided a way in. We needed the official point of view. And, much of the way this is coded is that we need to save water. Water's scarce, and therefore we need to price it. People need to pay for it. We've moved to a different system, whereas before people were paying flat rates 30, 40 years ago. They weren't paying for how much they consume, and therefore we need to use the market. It's a very effective distributor of a key fundamental need. And I think the new thinking, and it's only come around about in the last few years, is we need to look at what is a just water transition in a world where water is becoming more scarce because of climate change. And what does that mean? And that means to push back against corporatization, commodification of water, because what happens in that instant is the long-held values around, what we mean when we're talking about an integrated water system is that planning is a casualty. That resilience to climate change becomes a reality, that equality is compromised, and the list goes on. But I think these are the three most important things that we're going to be facing over the next years, and we're seeing it already develop quite radically in West Africa, Senegal, in Ghana, in parts of Nigeria, Zimbabwe just recently. Their privatization is on steroids, and this is a failed model that they're importing from the West in order to try and increase the profitability, the prospects for profitability for local business, often is working hand in hand with these big international corporations. And as I say, they're doing it, and they're justifying it on the basis, oh, well, we're the ones who'll be able to save what water we have. But you've got to ask for who. The majority of our people cannot afford to be paying the price that these many countries are now asking, and therefore, while we may have taps in our home, we can't afford to use what we need to, and therefore the policing of how much water we get to use because we're having to pay for it. Poor households are having to pay for it means that's happening inside the household. Arguments about, whether you get enough water to shower, to wash your clothes, to cook your food, and so on. It's a complex story, but we've got to get on top of it. Can only plan if we have a system which allows us to plan. And that means keeping water very much in the commons, being held and controlled by the public and its citizens. And I think there are ways where, we can do this through citizen organizations, through councils, local municipalities, which promote participatory democracy. This is the only way we can safeguard our water. And that's the conclusion I've come to. And I believe, these arguments need to be taken into real account in our own movements, in our labour movements, in our climate justice movements. We need to take water much more seriously than we have been hitherto.
Wow. Yeah, I would say that watching the film definitely gave me a different look at water, and it's making me more conscious of the amount of water I use in the household or just generally, even in drinking as well. But I'd like to find out from you. First, we've spoken about the technicalities of working on the film, but then working with Faeza, Meyer, and then Ebrahiem Fourie, and how they were able to let you into their home to see their daily struggles, just be a part of them. How were you able to build trust with them? And, what guided your choice to make them the center of the film?
Yes, both of them we have three protagonists, really. They're the main protagonists, their storyline, the African Water Commons Collective. And I think it's the most important line because it's about the situation where our access to water, particularly for the poor, has been highly restricted over the last years. So we have water meters where you have to pay to get your water, or you have all these systems in place where people who can't pay or not paying are punished and restricted. And then to be able to get free water, it's a very complex, time-consuming process and demeaning. It's a means test. You have to show how poor you are. So I thought this was if we are to build a water justice movement that goes beyond the slogans of water for all and so on, but deepens this notion of water justice towards a transformative approach, that we needed people who could carry that argument, carry those ideas forward, not only through what they say to us, but what they're trying to do. You only film documentary film rather than quick and dirty documentary TV means you have to spend time with people and talk with them and get them to understand that really all we're trying to do in this instant is to give as much coherence and clarity to their fight, to their struggle, to their reality. And in doing so, it means you need to spend long enough where they forget the camera is there. And you engage them really on a deep enough level. So you get to the crux, to the essence of who they are and what they're about and what they're fighting for.
Right. And that was very evident in the film. You could tell the passion with which both of them were actively, campaigning for better use of water and also rethink the stink, and all the various activists that came together to fight for the cause of water in Cape Town. Now, you co-wrote the documentary with Anita Kana, and how did the collaboration shape the narration or the narrative tone of the film? How was it like working with another person to bring this vision together?
Well, film's deeply collaborative, and we work as collectively as possible with the editor, our characters, our protagonists. It's critical that you are able to listen and to reflect and to work. The narration is always, I think, the most difficult line to get right. It has to work within the film, but beyond the film, beyond what we can see, but also working with what we're seeing. Getting that tone right and so on takes a to work it and rework it, rework. And that's the art, I think, of narration, which isn't too dense, so is as clear and as coherent as can be. I've worked with her in my films. She's uh, my key creative partner in nearly all of the films. It's a trusted collaborator. You need to trust and find people who you think can rate, find, and locate and work with our editors and other collaborators till we get it right, or until we feel it's as good as it can be. Again, and that's what makes film expensive.
Yes, so the final question is what would you say your relationship with water, or how would you say it has changed before working on the documentary and after?
Well, I certainly take water, and this is not only about the film, but taking the film into communities. Since we've made it, you realize how precious, how important water is for everybody, and you become a lot more conscious about your use of water. You stop taking it for granted, and you realize how deeply political it is, so many levels, culturally, socially, emotionally, how it impacts on gender inequality. You know, women are often the ones who suffer the most from a lack of water or lack of sanitation. These are key things. It touches on every facet of life. And I find it extremely rewarding to be working with water justice activists around the country, getting them to try and think through, you know, what they need to be demanding and how they need to be structuring their campaigns and attempt to get a national water campaign going. So, yeah, I've become a water justice activist, and I'm reading avidly as much as I can around the literature and finding more and more stuff to read. I'm just on a huge learning curve, which began with the making of the film. And really, it's about seeing water as a renewable resource and understanding its importance in building regenerative economies, getting away from the take, make, and waste approach to a conserve, protect, reuse, recycle approach where equality of access is central to all of those important themes or concepts.
Thank you so much, Rehad Desai, for your time. And if anyone is watching this while Encounters Film Festival is still happening, I know that the film has screened earlier, but it's going to definitely screen in Johannesburg and Cape Town. So check out Encounters on Instagram to find out the screening venues and the time. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.